What's going on, guys? How's it going? I'm back. It's been a minute, but coming at you with my favorite books from last year. Had a New Year's resolution to read a book every week, but I made it to 35 books. We'll see if I do better this year, but let's start it off. Coming in at number 6 of my top favorite books is What is Art by Leo Tolstoy. It's actually an essay by him. I think he published this in 1897, and this is whenever he gave up creative writing and he wanted to tackle the subject of what is art. He was in opposition with the Russian government, and they considered him a revolutionarist, and so he got a lot of criticism by the government, but at the end, he never gives like an objective definition of art. He gives a subjective one. Yeah, I've heard of better definitions of art by Rilke is one of them, but overall, I mean, it was good to read a Russian essay, especially by one of the greatest there is, Leo Tolstoy, but overall I'll probably give it a 7.7. Next up, coming at number 5, is Where the Crawdads Sing by DELIA Owens. This was her debut novel. She was a zoologist. I'm not sure if she still is, but there's actually a film that's being made for this novel, and it comes out later this year, I'm pretty sure. But I love the main character. Her name was Kaya, or aka Marsh Girl, as they call her in the book. But it follows her. She's a social outcast, and she lives by herself for pretty much all of her childhood, and she's being questioned for a murder of a teenage boy in her city. And I really appreciate how strong-willed the main character was, and also the author's use of language. It was a pretty good book. Overall, I give it a 8.0. Next up, coming at number 4, is Jungle Books by Rudyard Kipling. This book is actually what got me into classic literature. I first have heard of Rudyard Kipling from his poem If, which you haven't read it, I definitely recommend it. It's probably one of my favorite poems. But yeah, it was a great novel. It's actually consists of multiple short stories, and it isn't one, like, technically it isn't one, like, storyline, but it kind of follows it. And yeah, this had epic scenes, which I really appreciated. And yeah, overall I give it 8.2. Next up, we have Great Expectations by the great Charles Dickens. This was the first Dickens novel I ever read. I saw his play Christmas Carol, but I've not read any of his novels yet. But this was a great intro into his novels. You had to get used to his writing style a little bit, which can be tough. But yeah, it was a great intro into Dickens, into the Victorian era. I've read that he does like his big reveals. And this plot, it wasn't too difficult. So I kind of felt like the ending was a little bit predictable, but not too predictable. So yeah, I'm excited to read more of his novels, see how the endings play out. But yeah, definitely enjoyed this novel. I'm going to give it a 8.5. Next up, we have Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. This is a pretty easy read. I finished it in like a day, I think. But it's very short. I think it's considered a modern classic. This was a very interesting book, very funny. The main character was hilarious. It follows a guy named Holden Caulfield as he gets kicked out of his prep school, and it follows him for 3 days in New York City. Holden is a very interesting character. He may come off as like cocky or invasive because he calls a lot of people phony, and then we see his character go against these statements in his actions. But I think he's just a very angsty teen, and he doesn't want to grow up and be an adult. Overall, this was an amazing book. I enjoyed the humor in it. I'm going to go with an 8.9. Here we go with my favorite book from 2021, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. And this was my first Russian literature that I've ever read. And also the longest book I've ever read. I think it was 500 something pages. Wow. This was a great book. Great intro into Russian literature if you never read it. In short, this novel follows an impoverished man named Raskolnikov. I think that's how you say it. But he murders a pawnbroker, and we follow this character throughout the story, and we see his mental state dissolve, and no one really suspects him of the murder, and we see him question the dilemma if he should confess to the authorities. But this had a great set of cast of characters, and nothing goes untouched in this novel, and it follows the human psyche, and I think this is a masterful work by Dostoyevsky. Overall, I'm going to give this a 9.6. Yeah. Thank you guys for watching. If you made it to the end, don't forget to like and subscribe, and see y'all soon.